Streamline, laser focus. It's amazing. That advice is out there. It is so important. Try to figure out that one very small thing that you can do better than anyone else, and then strip that down even more and just try to really nail that one thing, especially in software. Keep it really simple.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the CEO and founder of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. And if you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com and grab some time with us to chat. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, and they're all great, and I love every one of our guests, and Ryan is certainly no exception. But Ryan Clark is coming on the podcast and give you a bit of an introduction. So Ryan, as a kid, liked to play played baseball and was selling stuff in the stands. And when as a kid, he was selling things during baseball games. In high school, he was involved in a lot of clubs and leadership. Then as he's getting graduating, he flipped 5 homes in order to pay by the time he was 18 or when he was 18. So to pay for his a religious mission, for his LDS mission. Came home, became a mortgage broker, got into financial, or a friend had him, told him he should get into personal finance and financial planning. Got frustrated with how clients weren't able to stick to budget and wanted to create a system to help them kind of deal with that issue. Had some more conversations with friends, got into a startup and bootstrapping it ever since. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Ryan.
Thank you, Devin. Yeah, that's a pretty good rundown of my history there.
So I gave the 30-second overview, but let's go back in time and have a little bit more in depth of a discussion on your journey. So take us back a little bit in time to the time that you were selling stuff, or selling things in the stand for baseball games, and how you kind of got into entrepreneurship from there.
So it's interesting. When I was young, I think my first memory is I got this back when we used paper, right? I got this magazine and had all this stuff on it that you could buy, and I was like, oh, I want the Nintendo, and I want the really cool light for my bike that has a little generator on it. I think they made a Simpson episode about that one. Do you know that one? Yeah.
I think I've watched most Simpson episodes, so yeah, I do know that one. Yep.
It's really funny because Bart
would pedal, then it would go on for a second, go off, pedal, and yep.
Yeah, so I got that. I did work and I did get one of those. It was awesome. And it was kind of like that. The light would go on and off. Anyway, but yeah, I got excited about all the things you could do with money. And I wasn't afraid to go and work. So, it was lawn mowing and it was snow removal. And when I had my baseball games, I didn't actually sell it. I recruited my sister to sell because I had to play the game, but it worked out. And then during parades, there's a big parade here in Provo, Utah. For the 4th of July, just like around the country. But I would go, that one, me and her would go up and down with a wagon full of water and we'd sell stuff. But the motivation was like, I could get this stuff, I can achieve. Eventually the achievement of things wasn't so much, or it became less important to me as it was the goal of just achieving. And what I realized that precisely when I had a really big goal. So when I was 14, I put up a goal. I had this vision board on my wall as a 14-year-old, and in the middle, I had this really awesome red RX-7 from Mazda. That was the goal. So you've seen that. It's the vehicle in all of the Fast and Furious. It's the main vehicle. It's an amazing car. So I had that as my vision, and up above it said, "I will earn $20,000 and buy a red RX-7 on my birthday, when I turn 16." And I worked my guts out for 2 years to get the money to buy that car. Now, what's cool about the story is I didn't actually get the $20,000, but I did earn plenty, and I was able to go pay cash for a really nice red RX-7. It was an older one, but I still achieved that dream. And the thrill that I got in driving into the school parking lot that day, it was one of those moments where you're super, super excited, but you're trying to be cool. You're like, I wanted to come off just with no smile and just kind of, it's not a big deal, guys. I'm driving in nice red sports car. But hey, I think
as a complete aside, so when I was in school, I drove a 67 Camaro that my dad and I fixed up for a while. And initially we did the engine and we, got it up and running, and it didn't look very pretty on the outside. And so I saved up and I, did had somebody else do the body work and everything. And so finally when it looked cool, I had a similar experience where it's like you got a cool car, it's a muscle car, it's a fun one and everybody likes it, and you're trying to say, oh yeah, it's just another car. But so I'm right there with you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I thought it was so funny because in my mind I was trying to be cool, but I think how I actually looked was just this big, huge smile, like, "Look, guys, look, I did it!" Driving into the parking lot. But for me, that was a real pivot moment in life, because I realized that you can work hard and you can achieve things. And so for me, to this day, cars are more of a trophy item than they are anything else. Like I prefer functionality over form, but I really do enjoy a nice car that can move.
Mm.
But that's kind of what really got me going, is I began to believe that if I believed in something, I believed I could do something, that I could work hard and I had the ability and the work ethic to achieve it.
Mm.
So fast forward, I don't know, 20 years or something, and here I am doing my financial planning and coaching business,
One
frustrated
question
yet again.
before we jump too far fast forward. One of
Yeah.
the other things I thought was interesting that you mentioned when we chatted a bit before the podcast was that you also, I think, flipped 5 homes by the time you were 18 or when you were 18 in order to pay for your
Yeah,
mission. Is that right?
I did, and so that's funny. That comes back to the same idea, which is this concept of belief.
Hmm.
So, so to get the RX-7, I'm 14. I'm watching this infomercial about, it was Carlton Sheets doing real estate. I don't know if anyone else heard those infomercials back then, but he
Hmm.
had this whole program of how to do real estate, and I was like, this looks great. So I spent, I don't know, like $300 and bought his program. So it
Hmm.
came in a big box and everything. And as a 14-year-old, here I am studying real estate. Eventually he has you make phone calls and you're
Hmm.
going to ask questions to the homeowner. So here's a 14-year-old calling adults, right? Like, how
Hmm.
much is your mortgage? And
They're
asking
like, none
these.
of your business.
Exactly. And I got turned down pretty harshly a couple of times, and I was like, okay, I'm done with that.
Hmm.
And I just put it to the side. And I went and did a bunch of other things. And it wasn't until I was about 17 that I thought, I need something that can really make money. I'm going to go dust this course off. So at 17, I went and I realized, one of the first things I realized is I got to be 18 to actually buy and own real estate,
Hmm.
right? So it was a few days after my 18th birthday that I bought my first piece of real estate, all seller finance. So I wasn't getting a loan. I was just making deals with people, but that's how I did those deals. And I did. It was five properties. 3 of them were really bad, and I lost money on them, and 2 were really great.
Hmm.
And I made money with those, just enough. Honestly, I think God did have his hand in it, because I made just enough to pay for the LDS mission
Hmm.
and get me out the door with no debt. So it was a nice thing. But after that, after I came back from the mission, I did do another what would it be, 7 properties before kind of changing out of real estate flipper into doing mortgages and then into financial planning and coaching. So there's
That's
that
no, I
history.
think that's cool. And I give you kudos. I mean, to 18 years old is fairly young in order to flip property and to convince people to give you money and to get the ability to get loans and do everything else is and to actually make a profit, at least enough of a profit to go on to pay for your LDS mission. I think is both great experience as well as a great way to try and earn some money. So now you come back from the LDS mission, you do flipping for a little bit, a short period of time, and then you get into, I think you said to mortgage or home and mortgage broker, right?
Right. Well, I wanted to make, I was realizing that if I was going to do loans, well, to buy real estate, you often had to use a loan if it wasn't seller financed. And I learned that I could make money doing the loans for myself on my own deals and for others. I also, during that same time, got into being a real estate broker, but I learned that you couldn't play both roles. So I chose one. And
Hmm.
there were too many rules on the real estate brokerage side. So I went with the loan broker, mortgage broker. Anyway,
Hmm.
but yeah, so I just kind of went along that path. But the initial idea was I could make more money on my own deals.
Hmm.
Um, but through that experience, as I was working with people and asking them about finances, about their money, I was researching and learning more of how everything worked. And then I was teaching. And I found that I really enjoyed teaching and helping people set up their finances right so they could have greater success, so they could get the home that they wanted,
Hmm.
or that kind of thing, which led me into financial planning and coaching.
So, and I think if I remember right, and correct me if I'm misremembering, that you also, one of the things was is you went out to lunch with a friend and he kind of gave you the advice or, hey, you should go into financial planning and go down the personal finance road and kind of or get into that. Is that right? Is that kind of how you made that transition, or what kind of took you from mortgage broker to more in financial planning?
So that transition, um, that transition happened just with the realization that I really enjoyed that conversation. And
Mm,
so I started just connecting with the big financial planning outfits and going down that line. I spent about a year in that industry. And the entire time, my good friend, who's now my partner, Shane Walker, he was telling me, Ryan, you got to read this book. You got to read this book. And what he was telling me, I was like, dude, you don't know what you're talking about.
mm,
I'm doing this stuff over here.
mm.
Anyway, finally, I read one of the books that he told me to read, and my mind was blown. I was like, oh my gosh, this is really what I was looking for, because I had in the financial planning world, it's it's a little sleazy, if I can use that word.
At least
Um,
there's a lot of sleaze. There's some great people, but there's also plenty
there's
of sleaze as
yeah,
well.
yeah. So I'll say that I'm very big on Americanisms and freedom and that kind of thing.
Mm,
Wall Street, not so much. And I think
mm,
there's a lot of problems around how that goes
mm.
for a lot of people. I think a lot of it's out of balance for most people. They end up being gamblers, not investors, and so I could do a whole rant on that. But and so this particular um, line of thinking or way of thought was more focused on personal finance, which is where I resonated more anyway.
Mm,
So not doing the investment. So my practice is always focused more around personal finance, savings, proper structuring of your finances, protection elements, getting out of debt. That's always been a big one that's real close to my heart. So those elements, and basically preparing people so they could become uh, great investors and build wealth consistently and predictably over time. But
mm,
everything in that whole process, and even if you want to be a good investor, it all starts from a foundation of cash flow. If you can't
mm,
control your cash flow, you can't do anything. It's out of that foundation. If we're going to build a financial home, it's out of the foundation of cash flow that assets are created, that even debts or the paying down of them are created, and as well as the entire structure of the protective walls and roof of
mhm,
that financial home. So cash flow, which means budgeting, it means purpose around how your money is going to function. So over and over again throughout my process, throughout my 13 years or so as a coach and planner, I was consistently frustrated because I'd put together these great cash flow plans for people
mm,
and they'd fall apart,
mm,
because every budgeting system out there is ancillary. It's separate from the actual money. They're tracking tools. And
mhm,
tracking doesn't have the power to really change spending behavior. It doesn't have the power to create more purpose for people's money. It just tells you, hey, here's what you did. Ah, dang, well, maybe I'll do better next month. And that's
mm.
about the level of accountability that those tools can have, and consequently, the associated ability for them to change things. So cash envelopes became, well, every time I'd use that, it was amazing. And so that takes us further down the road of how I
Mm.
created Cube.
So you now, one question is maybe backing up slightly, is as you get into financial planning and personal finances, helping people to meet those goals, did you go out, strike it out on your own, start your own kind of company consultation firm? Did you work for others, or kind of how did you make that transition prior to or starting Cube?
Yeah, so I got involved with a great company called Guardian Life Insurance,
Mm,
and they have, what I loved about them is the philosophy. The philosophy that and there's several other companies, Penn Mutual's another, but a lot of the good mutual insurance and annuity financial companies have a philosophy that I completely resonate with. And I believe that for most people, that is more important. That kind of a philosophy is more impactful than your investment companies.
mm,
So yeah, I got hooked up with them. After about, I don't know, a couple of years, I led an office, recruited guys, and
mm,
built up an office with them, um, and had great success there. But in the end, what I realized also is that they have this great training, but then their agent contract is completely backwards from what they teach. So they're teaching all these great things of how to be
mm,
free with your money, right? and how to help people really achieve that. But then their agent contracts very much locked, and legalized slavery in some ways, like a lot of employment contracts, golden handcuffs like crazy. So I had to check out of that to fully align with my principles and leave all of that, including the golden handcuffs. So that was an expensive choice. but I did that, left, and then began rebuilding with a company that didn't have the same kind of training, although their entire everything of how they were set up exuded those principles. So I'm big on values. And it was there after about, I think, 7 or 8 years that eventually everything kind of came to a head, and I went to the lunch meeting, which I think you're referencing, which was about how to build Cube, how to do that.
So when you had the idea for Cube, was it, hey, I'm going to, because you get into this, hey, this is a great idea. Maybe I should pitch it to the company I'm at. And it sounds like by the time you got there, you're already kind of saying, hey, some of the values and what they're doing doesn't necessarily align with what I want to do. And so I'm looking to already make that exit. When you had the idea for Cube, was a, hey, this is a great idea, I'm going to make my exit and build my own company? Or kind of how did you make that transition out of what you were doing to really start to go after Cube?
That's a great question. That's a really great question. For me, it wasn't an issue of one or the other. It was always in the same alignment of my own values. I get the greatest value in life not just by making money. For me, making money is like a scoreboard, right? It's how you're doing, but it's not how you're playing the game, and it's not why you play the game. So my real purpose was to help people, and I saw consistently that what I was doing, the tool, the advice, whatever, it wasn't giving the result that I wanted consistently over and over again. So I wanted a different method, and I saw that the Cube and this kind of a concept could have a much greater impact than what I was able to do one by one, one family at a time, doing their planning. And these families needed this, and the product didn't exist anywhere. So for me, it was out of frustration, because I knew what I wanted. It wasn't in the marketplace. I tried piecing some things together to try to make the whole thing kind of work, but in the end, I realized this just needed to be built, and it needed to be in the marketplace. So that was
now you have that. So you have that realization. You say, okay, it needs to be built. It needs to be out there, and I'm going to be the guy to do it. So how did you kind of dive in or get started? Was it, you hired a whole bunch of software programmers, or you went out and got investors, or you bootstrapped it, or kind of how did you dive into? Because there's always that kind of that leap, right? From you have the idea, you have, this is what I'm going to do. Now I had to actually figure out how to build it and implement it. How did you kind of start to go down that path?
So it's interesting. So the year prior, I was trying to build up a new little venture with two business partners, and we raised some money and we got into software. I finished. So I wrote a book at that time. It was mostly, the book was designed to be part of a client training system that went with software. So it was my first foray into software. And but by the end of that, towards the end, things weren't going well. I ended up having to buy the partners out. It kind of all crashed. But from that, I became very frustrated through that process as part of the book writing process, the software process, because I didn't feel like I had anything really unique and powerful for cash flow, for helping people budget. And so I was kind of looking for it. And then there's a moment, and when you hear me tell my story, there's a moment where a particular client called, and this couple, they had made about $250,000 a year for 10 years. And most people, when you hear that kind of money, they think, oh, they must have everything made, right? But this couple didn't. They had all the nicest cars. They had a nice big house. They had the best seats at all the events, sporting events, and everything. They were spending it all. They had $30,000 to their name.
Wow.
They had some real estate that was upside down, and they just were bleeding everywhere. And I put them on a plan. I put them on what at the time I thought was the latest and greatest app, because what they needed was spending control, right? And they were on it, and maybe it was 3 or 4 months, and then all of a sudden they fell off. And it was so frustrating to me. Everything kind of came to a head, and I said, you know what? I've got to do something. And I remember there was a moment where they called, and I'm at my desk, and I was just so disappointed and frustrated at the same time. And I remember I put the phone down. I was just like, oh, another person. This is so ridiculous. If only I had a system that worked a digital
Mm.
system that worked just like cash envelopes, because that really has the power to change spending behavior. And then
Mm.
I started thinking, well, what is it about that really makes it work? And started going down this thought process. And then the idea just kind of hit me on what it needed to be. And the
Mm.
key with the whole thing is make sure that you have to choose where the money's coming from before the purchase. That's the
Mm.
biggest key that makes the whole thing work. So from there, I had lunch with a friend of mine that was in the payment processing space. So he
Mm.
knew the back end architecture and how the systems work. And so we did lunch that turned into a 3-hour meeting. and that was really, inside of a yellow pad, we went through all these ideas, and it was a really intense, amazing meeting. And we both walked out of there thinking something could really be done here. This is possible.
Mm.
And then went from there.
So now, so you built that up. You guys have launched. You're getting it going, and so where do you kind of see the next 6 to 12 months heading for you?
So, okay, so from that time.
No, I'm saying from today. So
From
you had
today.
the idea. You now
Mhm.
implement it. You guys are up and launched, and you're running. Your people are starting to use it. So that kind of almost brings us up till today. My question was now kind of forward looking next 6 to 12 months from today. Where do you kind of see Cube going? What's the trajectory? What's the plan?
Well, to that, let me just comment. This is the 4th time I've built Cube.
Hmm.
So the technology is pretty cutting edge,
Hmm.
and most of the processors, well, one of the challenges of doing this is you can't do it by yourself. You have to integrate into the existing network. So that means you've got to have some kind of a deal with Visa or MasterCard,
Hmm.
and there's a ton of other ancillary systems. So it's a lot of connection that you have to do. You can't just do it on your own. Not like a lot of apps, you can just build it and it's your own server. It's all isolated. It's all yours, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this case, we had to play well with the infrastructure, which made it hard. So yeah, 4th time building it because of a lot of those challenges.
Hmm.
So to your question though, where do we go from here? One of the things that I learned early on, because the first company was called Proactive Budget. It was
Hmm.
designed to be a replacement of cash envelopes. But what I learned early was that clients didn't want just this discretionary income thing. They wanted a full banking suite that was built on these principles.
Hmm.
And that's what we designed or redesigned into Cube. So Cube is full banking suite, but built on top of budgeting principles from cash envelopes, which makes it totally different. Banks today are a bank first, and then they try to pepper some budgeting ideas in there, which that doesn't even work.
Hmm.
So what we've done is we've created this different environment. So honestly, I look at what we've created, and it's banking 2.0. It's
Hmm.
banking the way with the control of 30, 40 years ago, because
Hmm.
we are empowering the person once again to make their own decisions every single time for all their purchases. They have the power, whereas right now it's the bank that decides who's going to get paid out of your account. I mean,
Hmm.
Devin, do you have any subscriptions that maybe you've been paying on for a while, you probably should cancel, but maybe you haven't?
I'll give you the honest answer, which is no. Not that I'm like both me and my wife. So similar to what you did with the envelopes and that, we've done the Dave Ramsey plan. So we've been, I don't
Nice.
know, disciples sounds like the wrong word, but followers or users or implementers or whatever you want to call it of that plan. And so we miser, and one of the things that it drives me nuts to have those where it continues to ping you and you never do it. So I end up being a bit too anal retentive to leave those on my plan. Now I know plenty of other people that absolutely do that, and it just sits there and keeps pinging you because you're too lazy or you don't want to figure out how to unsubscribe, or you always say someday I'll do that. So I definitely get, me personally, I tend to be too anal retentive in order to leave those on there.
Right. Yeah. There's a ton, and a lot of subscription models actually rely on that a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
won't cancel, right? So what one of the advancements or the innovations that we have with Cube is the ability for you to choose which bill you want to pay and which one you don't. And so if you have a subscription that you're done with, you could just kill it in the app and we'll stop paying it. But
Uh-huh.
that power has been moved. Cube's moved that power back to the person. Whereas right now the bank says, "Oh, you got money? Yeah, we're going to pay this guy." and
No,
they just
and
do it.
that is cool, and I think that also it takes away the pain of half the time. I usually will, if I'm, it's also that free 30-day trial they always forget. So
Right.
I always put out in a reminder in my calendar, day like 28, hey, make sure to unsubscribe.
Cancel.
But then
Yeah.
you have to figure out even that, make sure how you unsubscribe or where you unsubscribe. So that sounds like a ton easier system. Well,
Yeah.
there is so much more, and I think it's a fun application. I'd love to check it out even personally because, as I mentioned, we love Dave Ramsey and he has the envelope system, but we always like to do everything digital. So it's kind of, I love the idea of kind of now taking the same envelope system that we like and bring it into digitally and bring it into the 21st century type of thing, and having a lot of that control sounds like an awesome system and definitely one that I would personally love to check out. Well, as we start to wrap up, and never enough time to talk about things, and always wish there was more time. But I always have two questions I ask at the end of each podcast, so we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is: along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what did you learn from it?
The worst business decision that I made with this was to rebuild the system. It's been doing software is more complicated than you'll ever think, right? Especially when you have lots of integrations. So, because I had this system built with Proactive, and we knew in rebuilding it this last time that we'd have to rebuild, or we'd have to redo probably about 40% of the app. And we're just now barely getting back. I mean, we've built a ton of extra stuff, which that's what we should have done. But instead we trashed everything and we started over. It's super clean. It's faster than ever. I love it, but I didn't have to do that. My team, we reviewed it for quite a while. We thought it'd be the right thing to do, but it was a lot more than we anticipated. So I regret that decision. But the other thing that I've learned is that sometimes you make decisions, and none of us have 20/20 vision. I mean, looking back, you have 20/20 vision, but in the moment, you're going to use the best information you have to make the decision. And you have to have confidence in the decisions that you make, even if they end up being the wrong ones. So while I regret that decision, I'm proud of where we are today.
No, and I think that I chuckled a bit because we also I work or have another company that's working on a software project. In software projects, they're always one that is so difficult to anticipate on the front end, how long it's going to take and what it's going to cost, in the sense that there's always features, not even features, but things that you need as part of the software that you don't necessarily anticipate or think about on the front end. And so it always sounds simpler, and then you start to beta it and you start to test it, and only to find out, oh, we really need this, otherwise clients can't do, users can't do what they need to do and what we actually want them to, and you didn't think about it. So then it takes a couple extra weeks, and then you get here and this takes a couple extra weeks, and then you say, what about this cool feature that would be put us well above the competition? Is always one of those where you always are trying to not overbuild, but at the same time get enough functionality to really make it work how you envision it and how it needs to work. So definitely get that, and it's definitely an easy mistake to make, and one that you can fall into. Was now the second question, which is, if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Streamline, laser focus. It's amazing. That advice is out there. It is so important. Try to figure out that one very small thing that you can do better than anyone else, and then strip that down even more and just try to really nail that one thing, especially in software. Keep it really simple.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back almost a little bit to what you said. And I always have I have a friend that I work with that always calls it feature creep.
Feature creep.
In the sense that you always are, oh, we'll just do this one more feature, and it won't take that long, right? And then you go to the programmers and say, well, we can definitely do it. It's going to take you longer, and you end up building out a whole bunch of cool features that aren't going to necessarily get you any more. It's not going to be useful to the customer. It's really not going to get you any better return, but it takes you more time and effort to get the product out. So I think that keeping that laser focus of what is it that we want to do, what is it that we want to accomplish, how do we get there, and what do we need to have to actually deliver on that, and then keep that focus is definitely a great takeaway. Well, as people they want to find out more about Cube. They want to be a customer, a client. They want to be an employee. They want to be an investor. They want to be your next best friend. Any or all of the above. What's the best way to reach out and find out more?
CubeMoney.com. All the information's right there. Cube Money, and that's Cube with a Q. QUBE, money.com.
All right. Well, I definitely encourage everybody to check it out and try it out and help use it to help you manage your personal finances. Well, thank you again. It's been a pleasure. It's been fun to have you on. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, feel free to go to inventiveguest.com and apply to be on the show and tell your journey. Also, if you're a listener, make sure to click subscribe in whichever podcast player you listen to or the podcast so you know when all of our awesome episodes come out. And also leave us a review so new people can find out about the podcast as well. Last but not least, if you ever need help with patents, trademarks, or anything else with your business, feel free to reach out to us at Miller IP Law. Just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. Well, thank you again, Ryan. It's been a pleasure. It's been fun, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you so much, Devin.